Well, Merry Christmas, everyone. We're so excited to share a fun episode today on the show that's going to sound a little different than our normal episodes. This is going to be a bonus episode on the Hidden City podcast. We made it some time ago, and we're really excited to share it with you. It's going to be about Shannon Neffendorf and Oak Cliff Coffee Roasters. So we hope you enjoy. Welcome to the Hidden City podcast. I'm Grant.
And I'm Doug, and we're here to share some of the incredible stories and people from Oak Cliff that you might not know.
We're going to sit down with some of the visionaries, craftsmen, and business owners who have shaped Oak Cliff into what it is today.
Oak Cliff is on the south bank of the Trinity River, a few miles south of downtown Dallas. While technically it was part of Dallas, it was its own city for a long time, and it still has that independent spirit.
We'll dive into the history and the spirit of this place, exploring the different challenges and successes that defined it.
This is The Hidden City, a podcast about the people and the stories that make Oak Cliff extraordinary.
Shannon Neffendorf has devoted the last 15 years of his life to this one drink most of us enjoy every single morning: coffee. And it's kind of been a tip of the hat to his grandfather.
I started drinking coffee with my grandpa because he drank coffee. And this was, my grandpa was my father figure, and he drank Maxwell House Black, and so that's what I did. I drank Maxwell House Black, and it was terrible. But, that's what I was going to do. And so we would, stay up at night playing dominoes, drinking coffee.
At these late-night domino games around the kitchen table, you could always find a warm cup of coffee. There's a certain magic about it. Gathering around a hot drink with friends and family. It's a ritual that has been around for centuries. And today it encourages us to slow down and connect with one another.
When I was at Blockbuster, I was doing auditing work there with the International Accounting Department. We had about 200 stores in Italy. And so I got put on a series of assignments in Milan. We had a corporate office in Milan. So I was doing auditing work terrible work in a really beautiful place. And I made friends with people in the office there, and we would start meeting in the morning for a cappuccino and a brioche, and in the afternoon we'd all break for an espresso. And I really became enamored with the quality of the coffee was significant and very different than what I had. But more than that, I think it was the culture around it, that it was something that brought them all together every day. You all did it. There was a coffee bar in every single corner. So I really liked that they had this sort of shared cultural experience.
This experience that centered around coffee stuck with Shannon. He eventually returned to Dallas after his time abroad, but just couldn't shake that custom.
So I would do this. I do this when I travel. I still do it where I have some kind of experience and I'm like, I'm going to do that when I get back every day. And so I came back and one of the things I did was no more car, public transportation everywhere. And then July came and I'm like, forget it. I'm getting back in my car. But coffee stuck.
And so he bought a few books and began familiarizing himself with coffee beans and the roasting process, realizing that he could roast coffee at home.
I had a friend who was like, oh, I've seen somebody roast coffee at home. And I was like, you can roast coffee at home? That's crazy. So I got a little popcorn popper, read a book, and started roasting coffee in my apartment. And then I started sharing it with people, giving it away to friends, and, sort of my way to say thank you to people for helping me out. I'd give them coffee that I roasted. Started getting a lot of good feedback on it, and I was like, maybe this is something that is needed, and realizing that the best coffee that I could find in Dallas was the coffee that I roasted in my apartment. And so if I felt that way, maybe other people did as well. And so that's kind of what got me into it.
My name is Marisabel Caballero, and together with my husband, we run Finca El Puente.
This is Marisabel, one of the important coffee bean producers that Shannon works closely with in Honduras. This is where the work and our story will begin.
I am a fourth generation of coffee growers. My great-grandfather started in 1907. He started he was from El Salvador. They were from El Salvador, both of them, the couple. And they came to Honduras with their cows because in El Salvador was too dry during summertime. And then he started to see the coffee, and he likes coffee. And one day they decided to let the cows, to sell the cows, and then live in Marcala and produce coffee. But he was an amazing man. We always, with my family, we always say, "What he was amazing man."
Marisabel's family has been producing coffee beans for over 100 years. It is a way of life for her and her family, and one that she is very proud of.
I was born in coffee family. Always I have been coffee. My weekends, my vacation time, all the time we went to the farm. Was my best time of my childhood. I had an amazing childhood, beautiful childhood with coffee.
She eventually grew up and married her husband, Moises, and the two of them continued the family legacy of growing coffee beans. And then one day, kind of out of the blue, she got a message.
We remember that time is incredible. It was 8 years ago. And when we received one message from one person that we didn't know, asking us if he can visit us. And we say, yes, of course, because for us it's very nice that the people visit us, see how we work, and see how we do the things. But we thought like just a visit. For us it's very important that the people that have our beans is someone who care about it. Because for us take long time to work it, to take care of it, and it's not possible that the last steps they mess
it up. Yeah.
Because it's very important that people import, take care of the beans in a very good space, in a very good how do you say, like a weather condition.
Yeah.
The roast, the people that roast, that take care of the roast, and the packing, the people that prepare the coffee. It's like you take care of the beans for 4 years, and then the last days of that beans, you need someone who
cares?
Who cares?
For like the whole lifetime of the bean. Yeah.
Yes.
Shannon remembered this visit as a turning point.
It was interesting. I found their information. I couldn't find contacts. I finally found a Facebook page that was never updated, and I sent a Facebook message saying I'd love to come to Honduras. I'd love to get samples. I'd love to come see you guys. I don't think they sent us samples, but they were like, yeah, you can come. So they had me there at their house, and I booked a week or like 6 days in Honduras, thinking, and because I'd done this a little bit before, like I would get other contacts and I would visit 3 or 4 during that time. Well, I couldn't get anybody else to respond to me from Honduras. Like all the other farmers that I contacted, no one responded back. And so I ended up a week before saying, hey, I've got 6 days in Honduras and I've got nobody else to see. You don't have to host me for those 6 days, but if you want to, I'm yours. And they were like, oh yeah, come on. And I didn't know it at the time, but like the visit was an interview for them. I didn't know until the very last day when they sat me down and they were like, okay, we decided we'll sell you coffee. And I was like, oh, I didn't even know that was in question. But it was a really cool trip because I was there so long. I've never gone back and stayed as long as I did that first time. That I got to see, like, they were like, well, what are we going to show them, you know? And so I just got to see some really cool things. Like Marisabel and her dad, they took me out to his grandfather's mill from, you know, like turn of the 19th century, 1920th. And got to see, which is like destroyed now, but there's still like stones in the ground, and you could see where the old stone mill was, and tracks worn into the ground from the donkeys turning the stone mill. And and all this stuff. So I get to see some really cool things that like most people don't get to see, even the other producers that they've worked with for a long time, because it's usually like we're here for 2 days, we visit the farm, we cup, and then we go. So it was a really cool trip, and it was really great just to get to know them. I mean, Marisabel is just a bleeding heart, and she's now gotten involved in politics to help coffee producers. And Moises is like this. He's just a consummate learner, and he's always trying new things and pushing and pushing and pushing. And I love going to visit him every year because I learn something new from him. It's like I can't wait to see what Moises has got going on this year. So, and I grow fruit here, and so I love visiting the farmers because we get to talk about growing fruit and all the things that I love as well. So.
Marisabel and Moises were nice enough to sit down with us for an hour during their recent trip to Dallas to tell us the story of how they met Shannon and to learn a little bit more about them. Before we said goodbye, they shared their secret to making the world's best cup of coffee.
What do you feel is a defining thing that makes your coffee so special? Or what do you put into it that you love so much that you feel makes it stand out? Other than obviously how much you love it, right? Your passion for it.
Clean coffee. Clean coffee,
Mm.
and that is so clean that you can feel some flavor that the coffee has itself.
One of it is successful for us is to produce like a solid coffee, or like how can I say the other word?
Long lasting.
No, like I forgot that.
¿En
But
español?
también se me fue.
Ah,
But like a solid coffee. And one coffee, you remember this coffee tastes the last year, and this flavor, like consistent coffee. Consistent coffee, yeah. Have a consistency. The same coffee for this year, and then you are waiting for the next year, and have the same flavor. And the next year, the same flavor. Because if you change, it's very difficult to the people to identify your coffee.
And another is one coffee that doesn't fade.
Especially this is in the roaster.
Yes, it's in the roaster side. Yes.
Because sometimes, like a coffee producer, have a very short view. The producer is thinking like I pick today, I ship the coffee in 1 month, and that's it. It is not true, because in the roaster side, they need some coffee for long time. Sometimes they roast the coffee, roast the coffee in December for the next year, and they want one coffee maintain the quality on all this time.
Shannon Neffendorf. I'm the founder of Oak Cliff Coffee, and I also my operational role is the green buyer for Oak Cliff Coffee.
After the first and second waves of coffee in America, first with Folgers and Maxwell House, then Starbucks and Peet's, there came a third wave focused on lighter roasting and direct trade with coffee farms. Shannon was the first in this wave to come out of Oak Cliff, Texas. And we should add, while coffee is one of his main passions, he also owns and operates Candor Bread and 5 Mile Chocolate, 2 more Oak Cliff brands that produce extremely high-quality products. We sat down with him and asked, why these 3?
I get into things because I don't have access to them, right? I get into them because I'm frustrated by what I can get. Like, I can't get good coffee, so I'm going to roast my own, right? If I could get good coffee everywhere, I would have never roasted my own coffee. I got into chocolate because I couldn't find good chocolate. I couldn't find, bean to bar, like well-sourced chocolate that had nuance and differences between the regions. We got into bread because I couldn't find the kind of sourdough bread that I could get when I was in San Francisco or New York or other places. And so we had sourdough bread here, but it just wasn't the same. And then you get to a point where you're like, I want to be able to share this. I sort of trying to use my selfishness for good, you know, like do things that I love, do things that, but like make sure that when I'm doing these things that like I'm doing in a way that other people benefit from what I'm doing.
But it starts, and you're just saying, hey, I really want a good version of this, and I can't find it.
Yeah. I always tell people Oak Cliff Coffee was born out of frustration. So we started, you know, I kind of organized it so my life didn't get too chaotic. But we started the milkman style subscription delivery, which we still do. But that was in the beginning was the only thing we did, and we did it not because we thought it was this really cool idea, because it was the only way we knew how to get customers, you know, our coffee. And so we would come home from church, basically roast from 1 or 2 o'clock until like midnight, and Jenny was in the house like getting my next batch ready, bagging the coffee, and I was out in the garage roasting it, and you know, through the summer, and it was not an air conditioned garage, and everything was hand cranked too. And then I would get up at like 4 a.m, go do this little delivery route, and then go into work. So we did that for about a year. And Crooked Tree is actually our first commercial client. Our first son was born kind of in that time. And I used my paternity leave to, you know, go hit up clients and share our coffee.
How did Jenny feel about that?
She was good with it. I mean, she's been on board the whole time, and she's never batted an eye. I mean, she thinks I'm crazy, but she's never batted an eye. And then they decided to buy our coffee, and that was moment was kind of like, okay, this is working. We've got a little subscription thing going. We've got a commercial client. If we really want this thing to grow, like we've got to, you know, to jump in all the way. So came back from my paternity leave and put in notice, and went from there.
Was there ever a moment early on where you thought, oh gosh, like this isn't going to work, like this is not going to happen, and or anything that happened along that kind of early stage where you maybe felt like actually this was a huge mistake, or we could lose the whole thing right now?
So early on, we were roasting in the garage, and when Crooked Tree came on, we had to get a commercial roaster, so we got a legitimate 5-kilo roaster, so we could actually, you know, have consistency and some batch size. And we didn't know where we were going to put it. And we had this house on Montclair that we were going to rent out. We owned the house. And I was like, well, in the meantime, until we find a place to put this roaster, let's just put it in the house. We can roast in that house, because my wife didn't want it in our living room.
What?
Although we did have plenty of burlap sacks of beans all over our living room for a while.
Shannon is pretty casual in telling us about how things got started. With the growing list of subscriptions and commercial clients, they were now roasting their coffee beans full-time in a house they owned in a residential Oak Cliff neighborhood. And this is when things really started to get interesting for Oak Cliff Coffee.
And so in this house, so we about that time, we started getting some press. We had a Dallas Morning News. This is the first time I'm telling the story publicly. My employees know this, and this is about it, but I'll tell the story. We started getting some press, and eventually the Dallas Morning News picked us up, and they ran an article that was like on the front page of the Metro section, and on a Sunday. It was a fairly big article. I think Ron Appleton is the guy's name who wrote it, and he went around and did a little delivery route with me, and it was great. And he published something about us roasting out of this house on Montclair. Well, shortly after that, I'm guessing some neighbors read the article and like, he's running a business out of this house in my neighborhood, which I understand the frustration with that. And so we started getting the city coming around. And then finally they came around and they gave us a cease and desist. And so we're like, okay, now we've got a handful of clients. We probably had like 5 at the time. So I was like, well, the city's not like, they're 9 to 5, so we can roast at night. So, so we would come in, and I call this sort of 2-month, the midnight roasting sessions of Oak Cliff Coffee. But we would come in at basically 11 o'clock at night. And we knew the neighbors were like, you know, not happy with us. So we were trying to like hide from the neighbors. And we we this is this is going to sound a little bit dramatic, but we blacked out all the windows in the house and roasted. And we'd roast from like 11 o'clock at night till like 3 or 4 in the morning and then go home.
With blacked out windows and in the dead of night, Oak Cliff Coffee grew their business. These were the infamous, and until now, untold stories of the midnight roasting sessions of Oak Cliff Coffee.
So one night, it was my sister and I roasting, and I thought I saw a flashlight in the backyard in the corner of my eye, like through the blinds. And I was like, yeah, no, just ignore that and keep roasting. And then I heard this like pounding at the door, and I was like, oh gosh. And it's probably 1 in the morning, yeah. So, I think I first pretended that I didn't hear that, and then it got louder. So finally I go to the door, and there are cops everywhere. There's like 4 squads pulled up in the yard. There are guys, like, I hear him radio that he's at the door, and so they come peeling around to the front. And there's this guy, his name is Joe. I ended up seeing him again years later, and we kind of laughed about the whole story. But he was like, what are you doing in there? He's like, we got a call. Just funny smells. What are you doing in there? And I was like, I'm roasting coffee. And he's like, who's in there with you? And I was like, my sister. And he said, you're roasting coffee with your sister in there at 1 in the morning. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, can I see? And I was like, I'd rather you not. And he was like, you should probably let me. I was like, okay. So walked back there, and there's like, 4 or 5 cops came in with me, and they walked back and they saw it, and they just started laughing. They were like, he really is roasting coffee with his sister. And then one of them was like, did I just read an article about you? And I was like, yes, that was me. And they were like, well, like, we're not the city, so keep roasting. You're not doing anything illegal. And they left. And I offered them coffee, and they were like, no, we can't take anything. I'm like, okay. But, yeah.
Narrowly escaping the law, Oak Cliff Coffee continued its operation. What drove Shannon to keep going?
We've got clients, and they need coffee. So it was probably another 2. And I would see them, like, at night when I was, like, even, I think later that night when I was going to my car, one of them drove by and, like, said hi to me, and because I'd park, like, 3 blocks away and sneak in.
Shannon, by this point, was making a name for Oak Cliff in the Dallas coffee scene. And while he was a native Texan, he didn't grow up in DFW or Oak Cliff.
So I grew up in St. Paul, Minnesota. And I grew up moving around a lot. We moved around a lot. And where I graduated high school was St. Paul, Minnesota. And I came back to Texas. I was born in Texas. Came back to Texas for college. And I came to Dallas, and I don't know if I can say this, but I hated Dallas. I lived in the village, and I was going to a big church and working in the corporate world, and everybody looked just like me, and I hadn't had that a lot of my life, but I've always been an oddity, I think, in terms of social groups, and I didn't really feel like I fit in anywhere, and so it was like, I've got to do something different, and so I don't know I don't really fully understand the path that led me to eventually looking for a house, because for a while I was like, I'm never going to buy a house. I don't ever want to settle here. But I did, and the realtor that I met through a friend had lived in Oak Cliff, and so he showed me Oak Cliff, and it was like, this is in Dallas. Like the topography, the old architecture, the lack at the time anyways of Lexuses and Mercedes. It was like, and just like, there are people here that don't look like me. But I don't know. I felt like this is it. This is where, I don't ever want to leave Oak Cliff. I want to die here. And I don't know, I can't really explain that. I mean, it sounds sort of poetic. I don't know that it was poetic, but, I think when sort of moving to Oak Cliff, finding a place that, a neighborhood that has a real sense of culture, even though that culture looks very different than it does now. But it had it, and it was authentic. And it was a part of naming it Oak Cliff Coffee. Like, this is our place. And I'm a big Wendell Berry fan, and read a lot of Wendell Berry. And he always talks about this sense of place and how important it is in our lives. And Americans have kind of lost this this connection to the place where we live, whether it's a city or whether it's a farm or whatever it is. And so, I mean, that was, I don't know. It was, I guess I can't really explain it other than that. But
Since then, Shannon has grown Oak Cliff Coffee into a powerhouse producer of the best and freshest coffee in the DFW Metroplex. But at the heart of Oak Cliff Coffee remains a caring spirit. Shannon is resourceful and finds many ways to take care of Oak Cliff and the places he lives.
so I live on 3 acres and we have a little orchard. So I take all the compost home. And this is what my kids and I do every Saturday morning, is dump all the food waste from the cafe and all of the roasting and the chocolate. And my kids don't love it as much as I do. So
when they're older,
Yeah.
they'll appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, and we're about to start getting some good fruit production, so they'll appreciate that. Because we've got a lot of fruit trees and kind of a little permaculture household. So we have that. In general, like I hate waste, and we try to reuse everything that we can. We don't have the paper or plastic in the cafe, and we have solar panels on our roof. So we try to be as small of a footprint. Sustainable is a term that I don't love, I think, just because it's misused so much. But we talk about responsibility. Like, it's not like this thing that we're trying to do. It's like this thing that we should be doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess we do quite a few things that way.
Shannon cares deeply about his growers and his partners. As Oak Cliff Coffee continued to gain a reputation, he began a relationship with one of the most historic and prestigious hotels in Dallas, the Adolphus. We sat down with their team to hear about how this all started.
Amanda McFarland, I'm the corporate director of restaurants and bars for Make Ready.
So, tell us about the first time you interacted with Shannon and kind of how that came to be, and maybe something that struck you about that first conversation.
Yeah, so my first meeting with Shannon here at the Adolphus was actually in the Rodeo Bar, which is currently under renovation. But I think that when I first met Shannon, what struck me about him was his passion for what he does and his relationships that he holds valuable and are really the basis of his business. So at Make Ready, we have something called our guiding principles, and that's not just about how we conduct ourselves, but it's also about how we conduct business with others. And we really felt that Shannon aligned with those very well, and that we had things that were important to us where we had a lot of those in common. And so Shannon, for example, is very passionate about his partners with his growers. And as we were moving through the collaboration, pricing came up and asking for discounts or whatnot. And he felt really passionately about pushing back on that and explaining his responsibility to his growers and the people that he buys from.
So you could tell, even when you first started talking with him, that part of his priority was not only just relationships in general, but to treat his growers fairly and to make sure that he represented them well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so it's just not about the relationships up, but it's also the relationships that he's created to get the product to where it is in Oak Cliff. So our relationship started when the hotel was under renovation, and Swoon, who designed the spaces and was responsible for the branding of autos, really, they were so excited about the history. And when I met Shannon, he had done a lot of research as well. And I think he was excited to be part of something that was so historic and iconic in Dallas as the Adolphus. And so our relationship, when I first started with him, I was on property and I was very hands-on with him and with the opening of autos. I also work with a lot of different coffee purveyors in our other markets, and we have a lot of local vendors that we use. And I will say that Shannon is definitely the most passionate about what he does.
Shannon carried his tactful approach forward, partnering with the Adolphus Hotel to build out their entire coffee program. He was instrumental in the design and the creation of their coffee shop, Otto's.
Shannon's provides a lot of support throughout the hotel, and having his coffee and banquets and catering, which does several $1 million a year in business, was something that we really wanted to do, and he had to help us figure out how to do that. So he spent a lot of time creating a custom blend for us there so that we could extend the relationship into that area of our hotel and expose even more people to his product.
That's great. And does the blend have a name?
So the Adolphus blend.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have our own blend that we serve in Otto's, and the banquets and catering blend is actually a little different because that, batching that much coffee at a time requires something a little different. And so the Adolphus blend is in Otto's, and it's very special. Shannon created it just for us, and I think that, just his thoughtfulness about his product is really what sets him apart.
We also sat down with Caitlin to hear about how Otto's and Oak Cliff Coffee has impacted the downtown coffee scene.
Caitlin Beveridge, Area Marketing Director for Make Ready, handling the Adolphus and Emmeline. The Adolphus blend is great. The cold brew or the nitro cold brew is like insane in terms of getting you awake. But I think we offer the best in this area, and a lot of the people that live and work downtown appreciate that, especially the coffee aficionados, and will seek it out intentionally versus just happening to come across it. And I like to think that our hotel, or all of our hotels, are really a good space for locals. We are not a hotel that only wants hotel guests. We want everyone to come out. That's how we're successful at getting everybody, especially in our food and beverage experiences. So that also offers a little nice thing, especially with Shannon and being in Oak Cliff. That kind of synergy between the two brands is really nice because it kind of gives us a little bit of street cred, but also introduces us to people that are maybe getting Oak Cliff coffee at the other locations, but then coming here to get it as well.
I think it's not just the product that gives us street cred. It's also he was very, very hands-on involved with our training. Yeah. So he trained all of our baristas, and he comes in and takes care of our equipment, and he's very much involved in the ongoing success of Otto's.
Mm-hmm.
So his fingerprints are all over the place.
Oh yeah.
But the atmosphere just really lends itself to a good creative environment, I feel like, especially it's a little bit more masculine in the color scheme. But it's definitely an intimate space, and so I love that. I love that there's different pockets of space. You could be there all day working. You can get a breakfast sandwich, and then you can have your coffee. You can go later. You can get the nitro cold brew to give you a wake up in the afternoon. So it's really a location that you could be there all day, in my opinion. Working, kind of having your different meetings that are going on, and it's just a cool people watching spot because you'll see that mix. You'll see the outside guest, you'll see the hotel guest, you'll see dogs, which everyone loves to see in the space, and so it just really lends itself to a fun atmosphere. I wouldn't say that it's that, the buzz of like everything going, but it's a little bit nicer than that in my opinion because you have that great mix of people that are coming in and out.
What does the future of Oak Cliff Coffee Roasters look like? You've been through, a series of different businesses that have kind of come out of your self-proclaimed selfish desires for chocolate and for bread. What's next, and what's next for Oak Cliff Coffee Roasters?
Right now I think we're sort of internally focused. Like, how do we really structure as we add these other businesses? We started to feel tension inside of like, what does it look like to structure these businesses to really operate well together and have good management and employees who are thriving in this environment. And I think we have one of the, like, working for me is a blessing and a curse because usually what I get is people when they quit they're like ready to leave, and then they come back and they're like, man, I've never grown so much as the time that I worked here. So I can be a difficult person to work for because I really, really push people and I have high expectations for that. So I think kind of how do we sort of create that culture that has high expectations but also has a really great love for what we're doing and for each other. And that's been a challenge. So that's kind of our focus right now. But the big vision is, and internally we've started to refer to ourselves as this, but we call ourselves Cliffmate. And so Cliffmate is kind of the umbrella, and this is not an official company or anything like that yet, but sort of the umbrella to all the other, to Oak Cliff Coffee and to Candor Bread and to 5 Mile Chocolate and Davis Street. And so we know that there are other products that we'd like to get into, that we sort of see needs for. We have 3 acres in East Oak Cliff, kind of in the middle of a rough area in East Keast in Illinois, that we've started planting with fruit trees. Like I said before, I love, the things that I love to do, I eventually turn into a business, I guess. So we'd like to, the goal, the big picture is to get into a little more food, to really put ourselves into areas where, and you guys were kind of touching on this with sort of the different kinds of clientele that we work with. I'm trying to say this all succinctly. We don't want to be in an elitist business. So even though our chocolate's really expensive, even though our coffee's really expensive, because of my belief that this is a true price, or at least we're trying to find the true price, that we think that this should be for everyone. And that's sort of doesn't make sense when you're thinking about impoverished people in food deserts. But I think that it can make sense. And so that's what we're trying to move towards. And so our goal with the 3 acres is to eventually have kind of a little farm that's supporting what we do. And so we're making the jams that we make at Davis Street, and all that stuff is and the inclusions that we use in our chocolate bars are all coming from fruit that we're growing. And our belief is if we can get a foothold there, that we can leverage the community to be a part of what we're doing and to actually put the work into building out this little farm and incorporate them into the food manufacturing that we're doing and create some education for them there on those kinds of skills that they wouldn't get, that they become a part of the relationships of the food, and that those relationships of the food bring value to the people in the community. And so when you're buying this chocolate bar, you're buying it because you know the people that are making it, and you start to see that the true price that I'm talking about, where those costs should be going. So that's kind of the big vision. I think we see some kind of a educational component, some kind of school, whether it be, school might be too big of a word, but teaching things like leadership skills, entrepreneur skills, agricultural skills, food manufacturing skills, things like that. Things that, for me are really important because I think you can take this and actually do something with it, and that aren't readily available, especially in those kinds of communities.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to this episode of The Hidden City. We hope you discovered something about Oak Cliff that you didn't know. If you enjoyed the show, I hope you subscribe to it on YouTube and then follow us on any of the podcasting platforms. Also, if you enjoyed it, please share with a friend, and thanks so much for tuning in.